the U.S. And no wonder. Cutlass gets great mileage.
It's sticker priced at only $62.94.
And now the good old guys will give you a better deal than ever. That means right now, you're this close to driving an Oldsmobile instead of dreaming about one.
From your good old guys.
Let's scare Jessica to death tonight at 11:40.
With Walter Cronkite.
Tonight, we see a very special artist and a scientist's dilemma. We hear the latest word in political speeches. We discover there's a thumb on the mileage scale. And we learn why a stiff upper lip may be a crying shame.
Welcome to our universe. An exploration along the frontiers of science and technology. In 4 programs over the next 4 weeks, we will explore a galaxy of human discoveries that range from the puzzles of outer space to the mysteries of the human mind. If you had a choice between genius and happiness, which would it be? Which would you pick if you were making that choice for someone else? Well, I want to show you 2 pictures by exceptional children. This is the work of a Spanish boy named Pablo, later to become known as Pablo Picasso. It was drawn when he was about 9 years old. Now, this is the work of an English girl named Nadia. We can't tell you her last name. You wouldn't recognize it anyway. She drew this when she was only 5.5 years old. A critic tells me that that's better than Picasso's. The child could not have been taught to draw like that. She scarcely could be taught at all. For Nadia also suffers a severe mental handicap, and the combination has made her the subject of both research and controversy. If that's the drawing of a 5-year-old, then imagine what she can do now that she's 12. We set out to reach Nadia, to join her inside the strange, sad shell in which she lives.
Nadia, she always has been tragically different. Almost from the day she was born 12 years ago in Nottingham, England, she's been strangely remote, clumsy, almost mute. A silent, passive child, except when she exploded in sudden, uncontrollable rages, screaming and smashing things. She was diagnosed as autistic, a label psychiatrists use to describe an affliction they cannot explain. Dr. Elizabeth Newsom.
It may be a failure of growth. It may be some kind of chemical imbalance or an imbalance between the 2 hemispheres of the brain. We don't quite know what it is that goes wrong, but what actually happens as a result is that the baby is unable to code language, that is to say, make sense of language.
When she was only 3, Nadia suddenly began to draw, picture after picture, prancing horses, crowing roosters, all done in a swift individual style by this child who was so inept in every other way. At the age of 5, Nadia was unmistakably an artist. Sir Hugh Casson, president of the Royal Academy of Art in London.
My first reaction is to say it's impossible. Nobody at that age could draw as well as that.
Aside from the fact that she was 3 or 6, is that a good drawing?
Wonderful. She suddenly pumped it full of muscle and blood, turned it round, jumping out of the page at you.
This is how a normal child draws a horse, a stick-like figure with 4 straight legs. This is one of Nadia's horses, drawn in perspective, in motion. She rarely copied anything directly. Usually she drew from memory, things she'd been shown in children's books days or weeks before. Even when she drew from life, her subjects never sat before her. Somehow she simply held the image in her mind.
Would you call it genius?
Yes, I would. I mean, I really would call it genius. And you see, there's somebody described intelligence as getting somewhere by rational methods. And you see, she hasn't got that rational method, has she? This is absolutely the fountain coming straight up, down her wrist, into her fingers, and onto the paper.
There is nothing in Nadia's background to explain either her autism or her art. Her parents emigrated from Soviet Russia, the Ukraine. Her father an engineer. Her mother a laboratory chemist died of cancer 5 years ago. There's an older brother, Andre, and a younger sister named Tanya. All perfectly normal. None of them has shown any artistic skill.
This is the University of Nottingham, one of Britain's main research centers in the field of childhood development, where psychologists have made a specialty of the study and treatment of autism. At the age of 6, Nadia's mother brought her here to the university clinic, along with some of the drawings she'd been doing for several years.
What's this? Cow. What's this?
This videotape of Nadia at age 7 was taken at the clinic early in her treatment. Except for a rare word, she did not speak. When spoken to, she rarely responded, unable or unwilling to communicate with other people. The psychologists recognized Nadia's artistic genius, but they wanted to help her to talk. Dr. Newson is director of the clinic.
What we did with her was to try to interest her in people and then show how she could get through to those people with speech.
It's 3 years since Nadia finished her treatment at the clinic, and now she only comes back for an occasional visit with her old friends on the staff. But that was where we met Nadia, an oversized girl of 12 with heavy features and awkward movements, a voice hard to understand. But it didn't seem necessary to understand all the words, only the human message.
What color do you want? One yellow.
Do you want a yellow one?
Pick salad.
Could you draw a picture of me?
Draw a picture of Mr. Cronkite. Draw
a
Mr.
picture of me?
No. No, no. Who's saying? Going. Nick. What's another? Dad. But. Agree.
That's me, all right.
Have you finished
captured
him?
the real me.
Nadia has changed. Now she will draw a portrait. When asked, she can be reached with language, but her drawings have changed too. After the language therapy began, they became more cartoon-like, more like those of normal children. And when you look at the way Nadia draws now, you can't help wondering, in emerging from the shell of autism, has she left her genius behind?
Well, that's any child.
But she hasn't been any child until...
No, but
Until
that's
I-
interesting. You see, that to me is any child. I would have said that was a child of 4, and she's now what?
she's now
11,
12.
12. That's, I would have said that's not as good as an ordinary child of 12.
Here's something she did yesterday.
Again, you see, that, although it's a fine drawing, I mean, if one of my grandchildren had done that, I would have kept it as a drawing. But she's 12, you see, and I would have said again, it's no advance.
We have been criticised, I think unfairly, for having given her speech in exchange for drawing. Now, I don't see it that way because we were equally concerned to increase her possibilities for drawing as we were for increasing her possibilities for speech. She chose the speech so far as she has managed to.
Nadia's days are spent almost totally sheltered from the normal world. The school she goes to is a special one for autistic children.
She enjoys life much more than she used to. She can have a conversation with people. Now, it's not at a very high level, but she can enjoy that conversation. And although that all seems very, very simple, I wouldn't underestimate it.
We do not know if Nadia's talent has indeed been traded for her happiness. Perhaps her genius will return. It always has been a mystery.
Somebody said to me, another parent of an autistic child actually, has it ever occurred to you that she might be possessed? Well, it hadn't occurred to me at all. I'm a scientist. You know, I don't have that kind of theory. It doesn't come easily to me to think about possession. On the other hand, that is as good a theory as we have. We have no better theories than that.
Maybe I was trying a little too hard, but I felt that I saw in Nadia, in her eyes and the set of her mouth perhaps, something beyond the remote, unresponsive, autistic child. Something sweet, tender, trying to reach out. Dare I edit possessed to read enchanted?
Know how you could save over $300 a year on gasoline? Watch. If you're an average driver, keeping your tires properly inflated could save up to $30 a year. Driving 55 instead of 70 could save $28 a year. Joining a three-person carpool could save about $270 a year on gas alone. Learn more ways to save in the More Miles for Your Money book, free from Shell. Come to Shell for answers.
You are looking at a very special place, the Bell Systems Network Operations Center in Bedminster, New Jersey. Here's where we watch the flow of nearly 40 million long-distance calls a day. If a bottleneck does develop, computer technology helps us reroute the traffic and get your call through.
Take your St. Louis traffic via Sacramento.
The Network Operations Center, helping to get your long-distance calls through quickly and easily.
The Bell System, keeping your communication system the best in the world.
And now to exotic Peoria, Illinois, where, wonder of wonders, there is political polling going on. That may not seem surprising on the eve of the Republican National Convention, but there's a technological twist that Orwell never thought of in Campaign 1984. The ghost speechwriter. His, or her name, by the way, is NASCO 5000. He works with an assistant, a printer named IBM 1403. He'll turn out a campaign speech guaranteed to play in Peoria.
We're trying to say that the political campaign rhetoric today, the mediated political campaign rhetoric, is so sanitized and so safe and so machine-like and so debugged that it is a computer speaking.
Communications professors John Cragen of Illinois State University and Don Shields of the University of Missouri have come up with a campaign manager's dream. They are test marketing foreign policy statements, asking the people of Peoria which statements agree most with their own political philosophies.
What I would like for you to first do is to reread through the cards.
The statements on foreign policy, culled from thousands of real speeches, are on 60 cards. Each subject distributes the 60-card deck according to how the statements match his views. The result, a speech that will please most of the people, most of the time. A speech written by a computer, almost without human intervention. So, having the perfect campaign speech for the 1980 election, we wanted to find the perfect candidate.
Hello, Walter.
This is the CSP-30, a computerized speech processor at Bell Laboratories, an experimental device that may someday replace your information operator. We gave it the speech written by the NASCO 5000 and asked for a reading.
My fellow Americans, America requires a president who is experienced in diplomacy and capable of managing world stability. Preventing nuclear
I don't suppose we should be too surprised at where technology has taken us this time. After all, machine politics has a long tradition in America.
I'm Pete Conrad. I've flown fighters for the Navy, a spacecraft to the moon. And in my work here at McDonnell Douglas, the DC-9 and DC-10 as well. The DC-10 is one of the most thoroughly tested jetliners in the world. It flies 1 million miles a day. And this is our new DC-9 Super 80, the quietest plane of its size. Quiet inside, quiet for airport neighborhoods. The new Super 80, the DC-10. I recommend them.
Omni Magazine, your passport to the future. Venture with us into the uncharted frontiers of mind and space, intellect and imagination. Look beyond the technological potential of today's science as we search for new worlds, new meanings, new dimensions. Omni, the multi-award-winning magazine of science, fact, and fiction, the very first of its kind. Omni, the magazine of tomorrow, on sale today.
If you wonder why your new car doesn't get the gas mileage you saw in the ads, well, so do most new car owners. In fact, if you multiply the gap between advertised and actual mileage by the number of cars on the road, what you get is a major leak in the nation's gas tank. That's why Diane Sawyer went out to check on the accuracy of the mileage tests which the law and the Environmental Protection Agency require of all new automobiles.
Want to get good gas mileage, America? EPA estimated MPG is 23. 22 EPA estimated.
And great mileage.
24 EPA estimated.
To get the miles you need today.
Are those EPA mileage numbers fact or fantasy? The Energy Department told us that the average American driver falls 20% short of the EPA mileage, and it seems to be getting worse every year. So we decided to take a look at the EPA test. A test devised by Congress in 1975, ironically, to make sure our cars were saving fuel. We learned that the test procedures are prescribed by the government, but performed by the manufacturers. The cars the manufacturers use are prototype cars, pampered models of the cars that you and I see in the showroom. First, the prototype is mounted on a dynamometer, a device that enables the car, in effect, to run in place. The car looks like a patient on an intensive care ward when it's finally ready for the EPA city and highway test. But where's the city, you ask? Where's the highway, the traffic, and the potholes? The law says the test must take place in a high-technology lab. As it turns out, a kind of automotive heaven. The air is a perfect 75 degrees. The simulated road is windless, curveless, bumpless. The driver is perfect, too. He speeds up and slows down exactly as the cautious EPA trace line tells him to. On the highway drive, for instance, this driver will average a virtuous 48 miles per hour. To get an experience outside the laboratory, we've come to Columbus, Ohio, where the Transportation Research Center is going to help us conduct a mileage test. I'm going to drive this 1980 Chevrolet Citation, which gets 20 miles per gallon on the EPA city test, 30 miles per gallon on the highway test. I'm not schooled in any special fuel-saving techniques. I'm just going to use my normal driving instincts. When I've finished, we clearly won't have any scientific model. What we will have is a record of the mileage I got in one car and one drive on one day. The test engineers attached a fifth wheel to the rear of the car to record the speed and distance of my drive. What was my city mileage? I got 16.97 miles per gallon, 15% less than the EPA estimate. Next, I headed for the highway, where I drove at an average speed of about 60 miles per hour. The mileage result? Way off EPA's, just 23.69 miles per gallon, a gap of about 21%. Why doesn't the EPA simply change the test? The same government law that set up the test forbids changing the rules in the middle of the game. If the government is responsible for the EPA test, the automaker is responsible for the mileage sales pitch. The ads have disclaimers, and if you can read them, they say the EPA numbers are only good for comparisons and shouldn't be taken literally. But the buyer come hither is stronger by far than the buyer beware.
We aren't screwing the public on this, not at all.
Alex Mayer, Vice President of General Motors, says there isn't any nationwide shortfall between the EPA numbers and real-life driving. He insists there's no mileage gap at all.
You know what? I'm not knowledgeable enough to know where the shortfall is, because I don't know whether it's in New York, whether it's in the country, or where it is. I'm just going to have to admit that right here.
But wherever it
we'll
is,
work on it. Yeah.
wherever it is, it averages out nationwide.
You haven't listened to me, because who said it averages out nationwide?
The Energy Department.
Did they?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the Energy Department needs to do some work on getting us some energy and quit worrying about that. And that's what really needs to happen.
The average person ought to be able to go out and drive and get that number.
The average person ought to be able to drive it, then, unless he lives right in New York, unless he lives right in Denver, unless he lives in downtown Los Angeles or something, then he won't, of course.
The EPA now says it's looking for a way to adjust the EPA test numbers to reflect real driving experience. And ultimately, they say, the adjusted number will be the only one you see in the ads. But in the meantime, you and I are left with an EPA mileage mirage, an illusion created by technology and a tangle of government rules, a test that misled the consumer and backfired on the government. Imagine 1 million barrels of oil, twice the oil in this tank. In 5 years, that's the extra oil we'll be burning each day we don't get the EPA numbers. That's the oil that will spill from the government test, supposed to help us save fuel.
You know me. If you're on the move in business, use me, your public phone, as your branch office. And you'll find I'm even easier to use with this, the Bell credit card. It's as fast to use as giving the operator your card number. You even get a monthly record of your calls. Okay. To apply for it, call your Bell business office. Use the Bell credit card. And use me.
I'm Pete Conrad. 15 years ago, Gordon Cooper and I shoehorned ourselves into a Gemini spacecraft like this and flew for 8 days in Earth orbit. McDonnell Douglas built Gemini in Mercury as well. Today, we're using our space-age skills to build the DC-10, one of the most thoroughly tested jetliners ever to fly. I know how well the DC-10 is put together because I work here, and I wouldn't stake my reputation on anything less.
Girls cry, boys don't. That's just one of the rules of our culture. Men are tougher and die earlier. Well, that's a fact of our existence. No one knows for sure why either is true. But Charles Osgood has found someone who may be close to an answer and a connection.
If you have tears, prepare to shed them now. When Shakespeare wrote those words, he once again put his finger on a uniquely human mystery. We human beings, as far as we know, are the only creatures on Earth who weep. But why? What's it for? Does that do something for us? And if so, what? A Minnesota scientist recently began wondering about such things. But how do you go about studying tears? How do you get tears to study in the first place? Well, that is where the onions come in. To collect samples for study so we can find out more about tears and what they're made of, Dr. William Fry, a biochemist at St. Paul Ramsey Medical Center, slices onions under the noses of volunteers.
Should I just get down here and breathe? Just get down there and breathe and take a good sniff.
These tears, whose function is to wash some irritant out of the eyes, look very much like the tears we cry when we're moved or sad about something. But to study tears of sadness, onion slicing won't do. Dr. Fry needs to make his volunteers feel sad. So he shows them sad movies, like Brian's Song, or in this case, All Mine to Give. In the sad parts, the volunteers are asked to hold a little collecting bottle up to their eye, so the tears roll into the bottle instead of down their cheeks. Offhand, you might think this would ruin the movie for those watching it, but these particular movies are sad enough to make people feel terrible, even when they're holding a test tube up to their faces. When Dr. Fry began looking into tears, he found that very little work had been done. The naturalist Charles Darwin thought tears were useless. Later studies suggested tears kept the nose from drying out. But the human body is a wonderful machine. Very little of what it does is useless or trivial.
Since we know that the crying process is an exocrine function, which means that it's similar to exhaling or sweating or urinating, defecating, these sort of processes, and all of these other exocrine functions are known to be involved in removing toxic materials from the body, it seems possible that perhaps the reason we feel better after crying is that the tearing may be removing chemical correlates of stress, perhaps, or some toxic material that builds up in stress.
The subjects in the study are asked to cry twice, so that Dr. Fry can compare the chemical makeup of the two kinds of tears.
If our theory is correct, and emotional tears are removing some substance related to emotion, this substance should not be present in the irritant-induced tears.
Dr. Fry has found that emotional tears contain greater concentrations of proteins and albumin than irritant-induced tears. But there's more to it than that. Tears may look simple, but they're not. They contain water and salt, which is why they're watery and salty, but they also contain more than 30 other chemicals, including fats, proteins, enzymes, hormones, and some substances known to be present in the bloodstream during emotional episodes. Yet few researchers have ever looked at tears as closely as Dr. Fry now does. He labels them and saves them, putting them in what must be the only tear freezer in the world. Frozen tears, if they existed at all until now, belonged in the realm of poetry rather than science. But here they are in a laboratory, to be thawed out and examined under microscopes and analyzed with chromatographs to find whatever secrets tears may be keeping. For example, they may show us the link between our emotions and certain stress-related illnesses. Men in our society aren't supposed to cry, or so many of them think. And maybe that ties in with something else we know.
We know that men do have a shorter life expectancy than women, and that they have a higher incidence of stress-related disorders. To what extent crying behavior, which is one of our methods of adapting to stress, to what extent that has or plays a part in determining those things, we really don't know. And I think that's one of the things that may come out of this research.
That's how science is. Sometimes the answers lie hidden, and sometimes they are right in front of our eyes.
We have shown you some glimmers from the galaxy of contemporary human discovery, and there's a lot more where they came from. In coming weeks, we'll look in on a modern-day ark, the science of putting a crunch in your breakfast food, and the secrets of a fictional universe, how they made The Empire Strikes Back. We'll also listen to a chorus of whales, and we'll dig up an old story, the truth about the original Olympics. These broadcasts are a continuing experiment in sharing some interesting, sometimes surprising things we've found in the world of science and technology, and we invite you to join our search. If you're interested in pursuing any of our subjects on your own, we'll be glad to send you a list of sources. And if you have suggestions for areas you would like explored on the air, let us know. And let us know, too, if you think this universe should be an expanding one. This is your universe. Good night.
The address for Universe is Post Office Box 76, New York, New York, 10001. For the reading list, send a stamped self-addressed envelope.
Wife's not working, the husband's got to work 2 jobs to make ends meet.
Do the Republicans have an answer? Convention coverage begins Monday on CBS.
This is CBS.
Tea makes the best iced tea. Lipton, Nestea, 4C. Which one makes the best iced tea? we won't say a word.
I'm Beefsteak Charlie, and you're gonna get spoiled with shrimp at my place.
You're gonna get spoiled at Beefsteak Charlie's tonight.
In Europe, the bottle of beer they export most is Heineken, and the bottle of beer they drink and enjoy most is Kronenbourg. Kronenbourg.
Airplane star Robert Hayes, Monday, 4:30.
Have you tried reasoning with it?
Well, it wouldn't close.
Oh, well, if you want to open it, try 1327.6. Mr.